Hi, my name's Chloe. I'm a teacher, and today we're going to talk about how to build students' metacognition with Edrolo. So what is metacognition? What we're going to be talking about is how we can get our students thinking about their thinking and how we can get them reflecting on their learning more so that they can improve their learning outcomes. So why is it important to do this? Well, we know that improving student metacognition is going to help them to become more reflective and help them to progress and learn more independently. The most important part, I personally believe, is that we want students to understand where they've come from, where they're currently at, and where they should be going next. Before we jump in, I'm just going to direct you to the Additional Resources tab, where you'll find access to a Knowledge Bank article where you can find more information about metacognition. You'll also find access to the Edrolo blog, where you can find lots of information about pedagogy and best practice in teaching and learning. So for example 1, we're going to look at how students can use self-ratings to build their metacognition. I'm just going to flag here, I'm actually in a student account at the moment, so this will look very different to a teacher account. You'll probably notice that there are some columns missing where you would usually find data. But what your students will see is they will have a topic and then they will have their lessons. So if I click into this first one here, you can see our videos will start playing. Students can click through, access that content. They can go in and complete their multiple choice questions as per usual. Save and continue. They get that instant feedback. And then at the end, on the very last video, they will be prompted on the right-hand side here to self-rate their understanding. I think it's really important that you encourage your students to do this and that you encourage them to do this quite honestly. Make it part of a routine and ensure that your students actually have a shared understanding of what your scale is for rating things. So I know for me and my students, if we were rating ourselves a 5, that meant that we were so confident that we could teach it to somebody else. Whereas if we were going to rate ourselves a 1, it actually meant we were so stuck that you couldn't progress without immediate help. So if I click on 4 then that will save. Now from a student's perspective, when you come back to the homepage, those numbers actually get saved here. So they almost get like a little running sheet of their complete understanding as they've scored themselves going through the unit. So this can give them a little bit of a revision guideline, but they can also then dip back into things and rate themselves again once they've done some revision. Let's jump back now and see what data we can see on the teacher side of things. Okay, so I've just jumped back in now to a teacher account. This is a VCE course. And you can see here that we've now got the class progress dash. So this is where you can find that data and see how your students are self-rating. So let's click in and see how they're going. So what you'll see here is you get a little bit of a breakdown of some data. I'm focusing on the rating here, and I can actually click that and it will sort the ratings for me. And that's going to help me to easily identify who in my class might need some assistance. So I wanted to highlight here that I would encourage you to look at the ratings, but then also look at how they're faring on the multiple choice questions. If you see a bit of a mismatch, sometimes that can indicate to you that students might need a little bit more help with how they're reflecting, or they might need to take a moment to, reflect on their reflections. And then obviously you can pick out students who might need some extension as well. So this data is so helpful to you as the teacher because it's going to help you plan what your class needs and when they need it. All right, so for example 2, we're going to look at how students can build their metacognitive skills by reflecting on their responses. So I've just jumped into a student account here, and this is Units 3 and 4 Chemistry, and this is a textbook course. So what you'll see is that for each of the chapters here that are correlated with the book, they've got view questions where they can access the questions for that chapter. So once students have completed some of those questions, they can jump in. You'll see that they start to get ticked off and they've done a self-reflection. Let's jump in and see what that looks like from their end. So for a multiple choice, students will go in, they will select an answer and click save and continue. Lucky me, my guess was correct in this case. And then they're going to be prompted to do a self-reflection. So here they'll either have to select that they're confident in their understanding or they need more help and more study. Now in my case, this was a complete guess. So if I was being honest in my reflection, I might actually flag that I need some more help because I actually didn't know how to do the question. This is something that you'll be able to see later on when we look at the teacher data as well. Once we go back to all questions, we can also look at what a more extended type response question would look like. So we've got this longer question here that requires an evaluation and a written response. So students can go in, type their answer, which would hopefully be a lot longer than the one I've just produced, and then submit. Once they do that, they're encouraged to instantly reflect. And there's a few ways they can do that. So firstly, they can watch a video solution that unpacks the question and then goes through an exemplar response, and they can use that to compare that to their own response. Or they can go down and have a go at marking their response using this checklist here. You'll notice that when I hover over each dot point of the checklist, a part of the exemplar response that it correlates to will also be highlighted. So they can have a look and see, okay, well, which things have I done and which things haven't I, and how can I go back and then improve my response? They will then again be prompted to self-reflect. They may have taken on some of that feedback and understand where they've gone wrong and be confident, or they might need a little bit more assistance and they're not quite sure where to go next, and they can flag to you that they need some more help. If we go back now, a second way that students can reflect is once they complete progress checks or topic exams. So I'm just going to go down here. We can see that there's a topic exam, and once students have completed it, they will then be prompted to review mistakes. And it's just going to take them to the questions that they got incorrect. In this case, you can see that they didn't complete the multiple choice questions, so they've all automatically marked as incorrect, and they've got the opportunity to go back through and have a second go and view those solutions as part of their reflection. Just like we corrected our textbook questions, they also are able to do the same thing once they've had a go at the short answer questions in the platform here. So we'll say view the solution and self-mark. The difference here is that they actually have to assign a value to their mark using the exemplars and the suggested solutions rather than just using that checklist. Let's have a look now at what teacher data we get from this. Okay, so from the teacher end, where we collect this data is where we click the view questions. So I'm just going to jump into redox reactions here because I know that a lot of students tend to have trouble with those questions. You can go through and read all of your students' responses and see how they've answered to see if there are any emerging themes. So for example here, C is the correct response, but I can see a lot of students actually answered A. So you can unpack that further and you can actually look and see, well, have those students identified that they understand or that they need help? You can see quite a bunch of those students have said that they actually understand now. So just checking in, making sure that that truly is the case would be quite important. But there is a small chunk that have said they still need some help. If I then go back to my questions, I can click up the top here to view responses, and that's going to give me that data grid. Now, what I would look for here is where a student has gotten a question incorrect, and that's where you'll see these little red triangles down the bottom, but they're now saying that they understand. So these two students here for this question are perfect examples of that. So where you see these is where I would be checking in with students to make sure that they've truly self-reflected and just to make sure that their self-reflections are actually correct. Lastly, you can obviously do something very similar with the topic tests and the progress check quizzes. I would get your students to go back over and then perhaps identify what are some things that they did well and what are the things that they need to improve on and how can they go about that in their next steps. All right, so once you're in your platform, you'll be able to see that in the top right-hand corner, there's a course materials button where you can download the Edrolo unit plans. Here, you will find your unit plan that's completely mapped to the VCAR study design, and you've got all the study design dot points here. So I would get my students to download this so that they've got their own copy that they can refer back to throughout the year. You could also print this off for your students to get them thinking more deeply about their learning and their progress throughout the year. Let's look at how. So an activity that you can do with your students to get them really thinking about the connections that they're making with the content and how they're reflecting is to get them to do a concept map of the study design. So here I've got an example where we've got 3 different concepts, 1, 2, and 3. You can see underneath we've got definitions, and students can then go in and draw arrows to show where they see relationships between different concepts. To add to this, they can use those study design dot points and any of the key language to help inform what they're putting on their concept map. But we can take it a step further. So for this activity, your students are going to need 3 different coloured pens. For the first part, they will use one colour to go ahead and write down everything that they know about that concept, purely from memory. Then, with their second coloured pen, they can add to it, but they can only add any additions from their own notes, which again can still be quite challenging. Lastly, they can then go back in with a third colour and they can use any other additions from other sources. So it could be additions from Edrolo, the platform, the videos, the textbook. It could be from conversations that they're having with their peers, any other resources that they have at their disposal. This activity is really designed to get students really understanding what are the things that they're finding really easily to retrieve from memory and what are the things that they're struggling with a little bit further. So again, all designed around metacognition and that reflective practice.